and external powers and internal divisions challenge Africa's integration efforts, what specific steps will you take to rekindle the spirit of Pan-Africanism, counter big power politics on the continent, mobilize African countries behind a common integration agenda, ensure resource self-reliance, and position regional economic communities at the center of this process?
Cher candidat,
distinguished candidates, your question is as follows in French.
L'africanisme est en déclin et les puissances extérieures et les divisions internes remettent en cause les efforts d'intégration en Afrique. Quelles mesures spécifiques comptez-vous prendre pour raviver l'esprit du panafricanisme contre la politique des grandes puissances sur le continent, mobiliser les pays africains derrière un programme d'intégration commun, assurer l'autonomie en matière de ressources et positionner également les communautés économiques régionales au centre de ce processus? Et nous allons commencer tout de suite avec le candidat.
And we will start with the candidate of Djibouti to provide his answer. You have 4 minutes. First and foremost, we have to understand that we are living in a world which is multipolarized world. This is a world that is actually multipolarized, and this world would not provide space for a continent or countries that do not have the right economies, the military strength, the capacity that is required, and mostly that continent or country that is not on the world stage. This is a reality. So what can we do? What should we do? I think it is very important that the Global South should actually take action. And in the Global South, it is Africa that actually has to stand out. And how is Africa going to stand out? If we do not represent much in terms of global trade, you cannot actually sit around a table where decisions are being taken for the destiny of the world. And so integration is, I would say, an obligation, is a must. When we talk about obligation, it is important that the AFCFTA should actually be functional. It is important that intra-African trade be developed, and it should go beyond 18%. It is important that African countries should actually use their own resources. And so Africa has now a seat and the G20 table. We want to congratulate South Africa for chairing the G20 next year. And so it is important that the African Union Commission should be working hand in hand with the African Union to actually make sure that Agenda 2063 is a priority item on the agenda of Agenda 2063 of the G20. Africa has to be also on the UN Security Council. Just imagine 80% of the issues discussed at the UN Security Council is African problems. When we talk about security issues, who do we talk about? Africa. When we talk about food insecurity, we also hear Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia. They have actually been victims of natural disasters, but we are not the ones polluting the world. So the African Union should also be fully involved in the COP discussions. The COP discussions should also be held here in Africa. So a strong Africa has to be an Africa that is present on the global stage. We have to see that Africa has to be part and parcel of the global south, and this is what we have to do. And I'm going to make sure that our commission is going to work to ensure that Africa is part of the global south. Integration is a long-winded effort. It goes through solidarity. We are not working among ourselves. We are not speaking to one another as neighbors. Would rather trade with non-African countries because we have non-tariff barriers, because our currencies are not convertible. Our currencies are not convertible. If I want to trade in birr with Ethiopia, and Ethiopia wants to trade in France, definitely there is loss of money. So we should have a payment and compensation system in Africa. We have to mobilize resources between 5 and 10 billion so that this compensation system is functional. Are we going to have a single currency in Africa? Why not? That is possible.
Daughter Excellency Randia Mandrato, it's your turn, sir. 4 minutes.
Pan-Africanism is actually dying out. No, because Pan-Africanism is in us. We are Pan-Africanists. You cannot erase the history of this continent, the history which also includes the efforts of our diaspora. So Pan-Africanism is really not dying in Africa. It is true that we all have a huge responsibility. The current generation that we have to work to make sure that the future generation should not forget what our founding fathers actually had in mind when they were establishing the OAU, so that all those who are in Africa should continue to live the same dream the same dream. We inherited this continent from our founding fathers, and we have the Africa that we want. The Africa that we see is the Africa where we live in, and the Africa that we want is the Africa that we want to prepare and which we must prepare. And so there is a clear difference between the Africa in which we are and the African Union, which is our own home, the common house. And if the African Union Commission does not put in the right resources, the human resources and the financial resources, even the diplomats and the military, we will not get to where we want to be. And so I am of the opinion that it all depends on the will of the people to go beyond the challenges that we face today. We all know the problems of our African Union today. There are certain aspects that do not meet the expectations of the people. For example, the SACA audit that was prepared by experts proposing reforms that have to be undertaken. We also have reforms that were undertaken in 2016. So we need to undertake those reforms to ensure that the African Union can actually rise to the challenges. The regional economic communities also have a role to play. I went to COMESA for several years and actually saw the efforts undertaken by countries of COMESA and East Africa, and we see Tunisia, Egypt in COMESA as well, and this will continue. We have the Abuja Treaty actually defined gradual integration at the regional level and then the continental level, and I know we will get there, and I am going to work with the members of the next commission so that together we can actually make all of this easy. And lastly, I think we should also bear in mind, we should also think about the military bases, the foreign military bases in Africa, in African countries. Some countries have already started to take their own destiny in their hands in terms of their security. We should be brave enough, we should actually have that courage to make sure that we can actually stand out there as adults that can actually take their destiny in their own hands. Foreign military bases in Africa, we do hope that in a few years' time, those military bases will be a thing of the past, because these military bases are actually a source of conflict. Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellency Randram Mandriato, candidate of Madagascar.